BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everyone. It is Monday, and that means that it is Zodiac Monday. Today we're going to talk about something that we've almost never mentioned before on the channel, and that is the murder of Joan Webster from 1981. But we will be discussing that material in the later part of this episode because there are some individuals that become suspects in that case who are also heavily connected to the Zodiac Killer mystery. When people think of the Zodiac Killer, perhaps they think of the state of California, or even last week on the channel we were talking about the Montana connection and Donald Lee Booyock. But the murder of Joan Webster took place in Massachusetts. And the first two suspects that, I learned about Joan Webster because of them, are Michael O'Hare and Gareth Penn. Gareth Penn is, of course, the author of Time 17. He was a researcher who went on to become a suspect, and I wish I still had the comment that somebody left on the channel back in 2019 when I did an episode called Notes on Gareth Penn, which, wasn't the best episode in the world, but the person wrote in saying, Gareth Penn was never a suspect. What are you talking about? Do some research. Well, as we're going to see, Gareth Penn definitely becomes a suspect in the Zodiac Killer mystery. First, he came forward as a researcher, and when he became a suspect, there are some complications with this. In addition to reading some things online and going through several series of videos, I've also been corresponding and communicating with Joe, who runs the Zodiac Killer Insights channel, and if you haven't checked that one out yet, I highly recommend it. Once again, the Zodiac Killer Insights. Joe, of course, believes that Gareth Penn was not only the murdering like the Zodiac Killer victims, but also the murderer of Sherry Jo Bates and Nikki Benedict in Poway, California, and the murder of Joan Webster allegedly in 1981. So I even have to confess that I thought that it was quite shocking when you look at the cover of Gareth Penn's book, and it's talking about the Zodiac Killer murders that took place from 1966 to 1981. There's even most people wouldn't necessarily think about the Zodiac Killer connected to that date because many people believe that the canonical Zodiac crimes ended in 1969, or that something else was going on and it wasn't necessarily a spree of murders that went all the way up to 1981. But the commonality that is shared by Gareth Penn and Michael O'Hare is that they were both individuals who were heavily connected to mathematics, and that if either one of them had any involvement in this, there would have had to have been a very high understanding of mathematics put into place, as well as mathematical signatures have been left in the Zodiac Killer mystery. Now, I would also like to do something that we don't normally do, but I want to read off an entire article. It's rather short, but I do have to cite this source. This is from weeklyscientist.blogspot.com, Weekly Scientist, and the author's name is Michael J. Martin, and there's a reason why I want to read this thing off in its entirety. But let's just have a look here. Between 1966 and 1981, UC Berkeley public policy professor Michael Henry O'Hare, a Harvard-educated architect who regularly holds court at an edge-style intellectual blog called The Reality-Based Community, committed first-degree murder with malice aforethought on 7 separate occasions. On or around November 28, 1981, he bludgeoned to death 25-year-old Harvard architecture student Joan Lucinda Webster, dumping her body in a Massachusetts field where it would be found in 1990. 12 years earlier, on October 11th of 1969, O'Hare fired a point-blank shot into the head of 29-year-old cab driver Paul Lee Stein. Stein was found in his cab on a dark San Francisco street, slumped, bleeding, and dead. On September 27th, 1969, Michael Henry O'Hare, then 26 years old, stabbed Cecilia Shepard, age 22, 5 times in the front and 5 times in the back. Turning the knife on her companion, O'Hare stabbed Brian Hartnell 6 times in the back. She died in a hospital in Napa, and he survived. And I'm sure some people would have already caught that. Most people, I think it's a well accepted fact that Brian Hartnell was stabbed first, and then Cecilia was stabbed second. But I, I don't think that we need to call out every single detail like that. On Independence Day, July 4th, 1969, at approximately 11:55 p.m., Michael O'Hare used a 9mm semi-automatic pistol to shoot Darlene Ferrin, age 22, 5 times. Turning the gun on Michael Mageau, age 19, O'Hare fired 4 more rounds. Mageau, like Hartnell, lived. Mageau, like Hartnell, lived, meaning that he survived. Ferrin died in a Vallejo, California hospital. 5 days before Christmas, on December 20th of 1968, O'Hare supposedly on assignment in San Francisco for the consulting giant Arthur D. Little and Company, did shoot David Faraday, age 17, once in the head at point-blank range with a .22 caliber semi-automatic. O'Hare turned the gun on 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and shot her 5 times in the back. Both Faraday and Jensen died instantly on a Vallejo Lover's Lane, or if anything, they were on Lake Herman Road, which, has a variety of functions. It's a shortcut. It's a shortcut in between Benicia and Vallejo. Finally, on Sunday, October 30th, 1966, Michael Henry O'Hare did beat and stab to death 18-year-old Sherry Jo Bates in a dark alleyway on the campus of Riverside City College in Riverside, California. These are the accusations that Dr. O'Hare has let stand without a legal challenge for nearly 30 years. And as you heard, though, this person, I highly recommend you check out this guy's blog, Michael Martin, but he's not actually saying that O'Hare was the Zodiac killer. This is more done in a way to articulate the theory that was put forward by Gareth Penn. And, let's hear about a reason why. They are the same allegations that this longtime accuser, a retired NOAA librarian and true crime author, Gareth Penn, repeated in a March 2008 interview with a daily magazine called Boston Now. Prompted by the pending publication of this story, O'Hare broke a mysterious near 30-year silence to respond, and we will talk about O'Hare's response to that in the past, but I actually just have to go to the conclusion where it says, Gareth Penn is full of crap. In an answer to the question about this Harvard University police investigation that supposedly drove Michael O'Hare from that campus shortly after the death of Joan Webster, Penn spent the better part of 3 decades researching and writing books about a suspect that he can't place in the state of California during the Zodiac crimes. At no time has that even given him pause. And once again, because I read almost the entirety of the article, Weekly Scientist, and this was written by Michael J. Martin. Okay, I think you can get the idea there. He's introducing that theory as Gareth Penn's statement, saying that, there are a couple reasons why Gareth Penn would look to this individual, Michael O'Hare. It's not only that he would have possibly been in the area, possibly, you heard that there, but also that, what Gareth Penn really wanted to do was showcase the mathematical signatures. Now, we did a 6-part book discussion on Time 17 by Gareth Penn earlier in the early parts of the year 2020. But with that one, I confess we didn't make it to the end of the book because it just goes on and on and on about like the mathematical signatures and converting things into binary and Morse code. And I was like, if you're going to read this book, you have to accept the premise that almost everything in the Zodiac Killer mystery is a mathematical signature, whether it's the stab wounds, whether it's like leaving items behind. Every single footstep is a mathematical signature, more or less. And I have said this once on the channel before, but to reiterate a very important point, someone wrote in leaving a comment saying, "You're taking Gareth Penn too literally." His point was not meant to have every single mathematical signature taken place. Like you see 4 periods on a letter or a scrap of paper, and then you draw a square, and then you divide the square into 4 segments, and then you convert the numbers into another series of symbols. It's like, it's not meant to do that all the time. Instead, Gareth Penn just really wanted to highlight something about the Zodiac Killer mystery that was heavily neglected by other researchers, and that is that there are mathematical signatures in place. And I can definitely accept that more, because it's quite difficult to accept the entirety of the premise, but that every single period on a piece of paper or every single underlined word is containing some type of mathematical clue. But you did hear in that thing that Michael Martin had written that 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 Michael O'Hare had responded to these allegations about him being the Zodiac Killer, and I really have to commend Michael O'Hare for putting out his material in this very precise way. The first thing I need to say is big shout out to ZodiacCyphers.com that has this segment here that Michael O'Hare has written out. If you don't read ZodiacCyphers.com, I highly recommend it. This is one of the reasons why I started going down somewhat of a Gareth Penn rabbit hole, because I was on ZodiacCyphers.com and I found this response that had been written by Michael O'Hare. I believe it's actually under the article where they talk about Gareth Penn, but then of course Gareth Penn and Michael O'Hare are heavily connected. And then I found a link that had been posted to the Zodiac Killer Insights channel, which I've visited in the past. I mean, I've been watching that channel since 2019, on and off, but I really started going down a very strong pathway, looking at all the things about Gareth Penn as both a researcher and a suspect. And that is something that not everybody is able to claim in the Zodiac Killer mystery. But I said that we would read off Michael O'Hare's response to this, and he says, in his own words, "The decades since Penn fixed his sights on me have not been a living hell. Much as that would spice up the story, they have been an ordinary life, punctuated by one or another flurry of fuss from Penn, sometimes involving page numbers. For example, the data pages from my PhD thesis, with this or that sequence picked out and circled and decoded into words that somehow fit into Penn's model of the crimes. I don't want to be cute about the murders, which not only left the victims and grieving families in their wake, but also frightened a lot of people and frustrated California and Massachusetts law enforcement. So for the record, I am not the Zodiac Killer, had absolutely nothing to do with those or any other murders. As far as I know, I wasn't even in California when any of them happened. Similarly, I had nothing to do with the death of Joan Webster, a Boston College student whose murder Penn had also tried to pin on me. Well, all I have to say is, if you're going to try and refute allegations, this is a good way to do it. I mean, we don't hear too many specifics about where he was on the nights of Zodiac Killer activity, such as December 20th or July 4th, but that also is in somewhat correspondence with that article that we read off from Michael Martin on the blog that we just shared, talking about how Gareth Penn cannot place Michael O'Hare in the area. I understand that Gareth Penn has certain pieces of material that are mathematical signatures, which he claims can tie Michael O'Hare into this. I also need to say that, I mean, somewhat of an apology to Michael O'Hare. During our book discussion on Time 17, I believe I stated that he had a PhD in mathematics, but even from the material that we've read off here, I mean, I quickly learned that he has a degree in architecture, actually, and it does seem that Joan Webster was also going down a similar pathway, but that's Michael O'Hare's connection to the mathematical world. Now, what would Gareth Penn have to say about some of this? And I particularly would like to know what Gareth Penn would have to say about this article that was written that, first lays out his theory about Michael O'Hare, and then how he would have committed not only the Zodiac Killer murders, but also the murder of Joan Webster from 1981. And oh, wait, I can indeed find out what Gareth Penn would have to say, because he has written into Michael Martin here on this blog, Weekly Scientist, and it says, "Mr. Martin, you are a bottomless pit of substanceless cavils." I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Bottomless pit of substanceless cavils. Either you are incredibly dense or you are up to something so devious I can't fathom it, and I don't care to. The kindest thing I can think of to say about you is that you are a time waster, and as long as it's your time that is getting wasted, I don't care. I have better things to do with mine. Your lies swarm around you like flies swarming around a pile of shit, which is one reason why I will never have anything to do with you again. Did somebody hit a sore spot for Gareth Penn there? Yikes. I mean, well, actually, I didn't even read this one that was written off. Like some anonymous person has written to Gareth Penn under here and says, it's easier to construct a plausible psychological profile of Gareth Penn as a serial killer than it is for Penn to stretch a gnat's ass over a rain barrel to implicate Michael O'Hare. Well, I think that is actually a pretty good way of showing how this story takes a twist and a turn, because Gareth Penn, as we said, was a researcher who went on to become a suspect. What I've learned from Joe from Zodiac Killer Insights during our communications is that Gareth Penn was never a formal suspect. He was someone who came forward about his discovery of the radian, which I believe is not only his discovery, but also his father, Hugh Penn, was the one who made the original comment, and then this is mentioned in the early parts of Time 17 about how the Zodiac used the word radian in a letter, and Hugh Penn, Gareth's father, was the person who said that only 99% of people would not use that in their working vocabulary. So then Gareth was the one who put it on top of Mount Diablo and saw that one arm of this angle that at 57.29, 57.3 degrees thereabouts goes to Blue Rock Springs, and one arm goes to Presidio Heights, or the Paul Stein murder. And if you look at Blue Rock Springs and then you look at the Paul Stein murder, well, what's in the middle of those? Springs ends in GS, and the word Presidio begins with what letter? P. GSP. Gareth S. Penn. Gareth Sewell Penn. All of that seems to line up as well. Now, there are a couple other things that we should say about some of the material that has been created for Michael O'Hare as a Zodiac killer suspect. And the absolute last thing that I would do is to share my favorite part of the book Time 17 with you. And that talks about how there are it is one of the mathematical signatures that was used by Gareth Penn to show that Michael O'Hare may have created the Zodiac Killer mystery and committed all these murders as a part of a giant mathematical masterpiece. And this is from page 36 and 37. Michael O'Hare had been the editor of the Cambridge 38. Time 17 gave the date of his mother's 38th birthday, and the date of his mother's birthday was September 7th, 1945. 9745. He himself had been born on the 22nd of January, 1943. On September 27th, 1969, the date of the Lake Berryessa murder, he was 26 years of age. In months, he was 320, but in days, his age was 9,745. 9745. He was times 17. And throughout the book, the numbers 17 and 38 are very valuable in Gareth Penn's discussions on Michael O'Hare. But this is my favorite part here, because I was saying, even if Michael O'Hare was not the Zodiac Killer, I think that that's just impressive. Like, the thought process that is involved with Gareth Penn, it's what I called an impressive work of mathematical creativity. And if you want to hear more about this, I highly recommend you check out our book discussion on Gareth Penn and Time 17, available here on this channel, Black Box Online Radio. Now, I just want to go on to a little bit more about that involving the radian theory, because this is really not only Gareth Penn's claim to fame, it was his first claim to fame, we should say, and then it goes into some other things about becoming a suspect himself, and people began looking at Gareth for committing the murders. And there's a video out there called Is Gareth Penn the Zodiac Killer? Perhaps you've seen it before if you've made it to this far off corner of YouTube, but I would like to play a segment of this, a rather lengthy segment actually, and then we can just not only not only talk about it, but we can hear Gareth Penn in his own words talking about his theory. So let's have a listen here. And first we're going to hear Nancy Slover, and then we will hear Gareth Penn doing some back and forth.
Okay. He spoke in a monotone. It's like he had rehearsed it or was reading what he was saying. He had a very non-emotional voice.
It was rather odd that something of this nature would appear in a letter such as that written by the Zodiac. He had mentioned the word radiant, which is not in the active vocabulary of 99% of the U.S. population.
You know, his first words were, "I want to report a double murder. If you'll go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park." And I said, "Yes, sir, we have a report of a shooting in that area. I still need to get your name and your location." And he said, "You'll find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. And I also killed those kids last year."
Well, he was looking for what you might call a sacrifice at a particular location. And the surest way to get a victim to a particular location is to hire a cab driver, because a cab driver will go wherever you want him to go for the implied promise of payment. Except when they got to the end of this trip,
I got a very taunting, scary type, creepy feeling from the call. And when he got to the end of his statement, it's hard for me to duplicate, but instead of just saying, "If you read my report, it means nothing," but if you hear, you know, if you could have heard, I can't explain it as well as I still hear it. You know, it was from somebody who was really out there, but his voice really changed when he came to goodbye, and it wasn't just goodbye. Now it may sound a little silly to people. It didn't to me at the time, but he said something like, "Goodbye," and he hangs up, and I'm just kind of sitting there thinking, oh my God.
There was something else that had occurred not only to me, but also to the police and any number of people, and that was the role of water in the entire Zodiac episode. The first murder was in Riverside. There was one committed at the water's edge at Lake Berryessa, Lake Herman Road. In fact, when I went to look at the site where the cab driver was murdered, it was right next to a fire hydrant. So the thought passed through my mind that water might be a clue to his identity.
Hello, please.
Okay, and those were the words of Gareth Penn and Nancy Slover. And I believe that this video, which is titled, "Is Gareth Penn the Zodiac Killer?" from Zodiac Killer Archive, really wants to show that Gareth Penn's voice sounds perhaps the way that Nancy Slover was describing. And just to repeat one thing that I have mentioned in the past on the channel, Gareth Penn is a German linguist. I mean, he has multiple degrees. One's in library science and one's in linguistics, I think. It's been a while since I've looked at that, but he is fluent in the German language, and I am certainly not fluent in the German language, but back when I was in German class, my German tutor told me that if you want to talk in German, you use a monotone voice until the very end. And as you heard, he was talking in somewhat of a monotone until the very end with that odd goodbye. I would love to hear what some German nationals would have to say about that, or anyone else who is fluent in the German language can also weigh in. But I mean, I was like, well, that all seems to be consistent to me, that's consistent with Gareth Penn's speech pattern. And I do have to be honest, no matter what, even if you don't think that Gareth Penn is the Zodiac Killer, the way that Nancy Slover was describing that voice there, it sounds exactly like what was coming to mind. the way that Gareth Penn was just talking. But there was a second reason that I wanted to play that clip. Yes, of course, talking about the radian, the angle 57.3 degrees, 57.29 degrees, and that's the big thing. But the second one is the body of water connection. Lots of people believe that there was a body of water connection in the Zodiac Killer mystery. But when you see things like Blue Rock Springs, Lake Herman Road, Lake Berryessa, Riverside, my first response is, the Riverside murder of Sherry Jo Bates has never been confirmed to have been genuine Zodiac Killer activity. And when I was communicating with Joe from Zodiac Killer Insights, who believes that not only was Gareth Penn the murderer of the 5 victims in the Bay Area, but also the murderer of Sherry Jo Bates, that he would have had to have just driven down south on October 30th or October 29th, thereabouts, committed the murder and then gone back to San Francisco. As far as I understand, on October 30th of 1966, Gareth Penn was in San Francisco, California. He was in the Bay Area, but there's an odd thing that is in the book Times 17. I'm not even sure if I remember this correctly, but Gareth Penn says that he couldn't be the Zodiac Killer because when he's first talked about being a suspect, he's like, well, on the night of the Paul Stein murder, October 11th, 1969, I was in Oklahoma at the time. I couldn't be the guy. That was his first response. But then later on, like 30 or 40 pages later, he says, actually, I was in the Bay Area for all of the Zodiac Killer activities. So then I was like, wait, what? I mean, because I think if we could get certainty that Gareth Penn was in Oklahoma, then we would be able to eliminate him as a suspect very easily. But it appears that he was in the Bay Area for all of the confirmed Zodiac activities. Now, when we look at Gareth Penn as a suspect, I would like to go through some of the material that Joe has shared with me about not only the 5 confirmed Zodiac victims, but also Sherry Jo Bates and the murder of Nikki Benedict in Poway, California, which took place in 1967. So we will do that right after this quick message. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to talk about some of the ways in which you can help Black Box Online Radio. This channel relies on your support, and the best way you can help out is just by listening to some more content. If you like what you hear, you can hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends on social media. But I should also say that Black Box Online Radio now has a Teespring page, and there will be some links in the description box. Please feel free to check out some of the merchandise that is available. Almost all sizes and colors are listed. So, you can also help out by going over to the Zodiac Killer channel and watching the documentary series Obsession into Darkness, parts 1, 2, and 3. I was one of the contributors for that, and you can see some other great Zodiac content on the Zodiac Killer channel. And yes, there will be a part 4 of Obsession into Darkness at some point in the future. And for now, let's get back to the show. Okay, hello, and we are back. At this time, I said we were going to talk about Gareth Penn as a suspect, and some of the material that I had learned from Joe, who runs the Zodiac Killer Insights channel, and I really got more into his stuff because of a particular video that he did where he interviewed Gareth Penn, and even on the phone, Gareth Penn says that he remembered Joe eventually, that he had spoken to him once before, and Joe shared with me that he's actually had the chance to call Gareth Penn 4 different times, talking to him about being the Zodiac Killer, and he has never once denied it. Now, you heard that segment that we did on Michael O'Hare, where we read off his blatant denial. I found that one on ZodiacCyphers.com, which then gave me the link to the Gareth Penn interview with Joe from Zodiac Killer Insights, and like I said, O'Hare did a solid job of denying the allegations. He's like, I don't want to make light of the murders. I was not the Zodiac Killer. I wasn't in California on any of those dates, and he also did not murder Joan Webster. So, with Gareth Penn, I think it's very disappointing that somebody like Gareth Penn, who had just had numerous opportunities to deny this, has not. And you even also heard that comment that he had responded to Michael Martin, just saying, you're like flies around a piece of shit, or whatever it was, instead of saying any reasons about why the guy is wrong. So he's being very dismissive of certain things, but he also isn't blatantly denying it, and I do not think that that's very helpful on Gareth Penn's part. However, if Gareth Penn is going to be viewed as a researcher who then became a Zodiac killer suspect, I can also comprehend, as like, the other side of the coin, the other side of the issue, on the other hand, I can understand why he would tell people that they can just say whatever they want about him on the internet. Number one, I think he probably gets off on some of the publicity, and Joe even phrased this even better than I did when he was saying that he's an egocentric individual. He wants to be mentioned in any single way, so that's why he isn't denying the allegations or telling people to stop saying things about him or threatening lawsuits or doing anything like that, because numerous people have accused Gareth Penn of being the Zodiac killer, and I think that Ray Grant even had some things to say about that, although I'm not an expert on Ray Grant, but he had a larger theory that it included Gareth Penn, Hugh Penn, Michael O'Hare, and so on. As we said, Hugh Penn, Gareth's father, was the person who made the initial observation about the radian, and Gareth was the one who put it on top of Mount Diablo and found out that it connects to the locations. Something else that Joe shared with me about that was that Gareth Penn was saying that one arm of the radian goes to Blue Rock Springs, right, where Darlene Ferrin was murdered and the shooting of Mike Michaud. One arm of the radian goes to Presidio Heights, where Paul Stein was murdered. And in the middle of the radian is Lake Berryessa. Lake Berryessa is equidistant to Mount Diablo, as is Travis Air Force Base. So we're thinking that, is that a clue that you need to look for somebody who is ex-military or even ex-Air Force? I mean, Gareth Penn was someone who was in the military, definitely, and he worked in artillery surveying. And artillery surveying is one place in which you might have access to something like a radian. And Joe also pointed out that if Gareth Penn worked in artillery surveying, why didn't he talk more about that in the book, or why didn't he come out so openly and saying that this is how you learn about radians? And giving a shout out to YouTube user Jamie Hendrickson, who also wrote saying that pilots and sailors use radians. It doesn't have to be someone who's a PhD in mathematics or PhD in architecture or someone who's educated at the graduate level. Pilots and sailors would be familiar with radians. And when I was listening to the Zodcast, which is hosted by Drew Beeson, excellent channel, by the way, and he did an episode when he was talking about, I think the guy's name is Michael Cole, who had written a book talking about how he believed that the Zodiac killer was someone who had celestial navigation training. And I think you can see where this is going. Someone who is familiar with like a pilot, sailor type, or maybe someone who is ex-Air Force, who is familiar with celestial navigation, some type of exposure to the radians. And with Nikki Benedict, Sherry Jo Bates, the Zodiac killer victims, a lot of people are simply asking the question, why, and also how? Why were these victims chosen, and what is the real significance? How do you establish links with crimes that seem so clearly not to be together? I mean, they weren't people all from a specific organization. And when you look at Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside, as well as Nikki Benedict in Poway, compared to the victims in the Bay Area, they aren't even in the same city. Yeah, sure, you could say the same state, but then you go to the murder of Joan Webster in 1981 in Massachusetts, and you're nationwide now. It's like, where really are the boundaries? And the number 184 would have significance for a couple reasons. It would also explain a particular motive, and that is to show that this isn't only about some type of sexual-based thrill killing. The Zodiac even wrote in the 408 cipher, it's better than getting your rocks off with a girl, meaning that this is something, well, I mean, there are a few possibilities and about what that could mean, giving credit to Richard Grinnell, who highlighted that, but one possibility, we should say, is that it shows that this is something that is better than sexuality, and Douglas Oswald also talked about this. But a point I'm trying to say is that a theory that has been put forward is that this was all a mathematical masterpiece. Why were these victims chosen? Because of their correlations to mathematical signatures, and that's what I think the heart and soul of the Gareth Penn theory is, both as a researcher and a suspect, and that's the stuff that he wanted to attract us to with Michael O'Hare as a suspect in his book Time 17. These crimes were committed for a reason, and it's because of how this person wanted to create this type of criminal masterwork that was done in a way in which the signatures are left to clue you in, so that the answer is in plain sight. You just have to figure it out. And the person who created all this is just sitting back and laughing and thinking, I'm so much smarter than everyone else. I'm so much more powerful than everyone else. I'm a murderer and I got away with it. And when we looked at the murder of Nikki Benedict down in Poway in 1967, it really is something that, well, I mean, I would just like to give the big points that stood out to me. Number one, it occurred at 6:30 p.m., thereabouts. I mean, there's no signature left behind, but the Zodiac left 6:30 p.m. on the car door at Lake Berryessa. Nikki Benedict was also stabbed with a knife, and Cecilia Shepard was the only confirmed Zodiac murder victim that was killed with a knife. And those are some things that it's almost like it's like paying a particular connection. But I think it was Jerome, I don't have the comment in front of me, but giving a shout out, who left the comment saying that he did not believe that the murder of Nikki Benedict had any connection to the Zodiac Killer mystery. Instead, what most likely happened with that one, and he has looked into this a little bit and shared some of his findings, is that someone had been recently released from prison or a mental institution, and they were Nikki Benedict was murdered by an unstable individual. We also talked about another suspect, and that one that was put forward by the channel Zodiac Killer Identified. I think the guy's name is Zepp that runs that one, and he said that he provided the suspect Robert Fisk, Bob Fisk, as the murderer of Nikki Benedict. That's his suspect in that mystery. And so if we can learn anything from Thomas Henry Horan, it is to think outside the box. In the book, The Myth of the Zodiac Killer, just one point that he wanted to share with us is that in these crimes, whether it's Sherry Jo Bates, Nikki Benedict, the Zodiac Killer mystery, the murder of Joan Webster, we should always remember that there are other suspects. But if we want to look at Gareth Penn as a suspect for the murders of Sherry Jo Bates, Nikki Benedict, and the Zodiac Killer, what is the significance of the number 184? Okay, so we have the numeric values, right? And that totals up in Gareth Penn's name, the alphanumeric values total to 184. What Gareth Penn's big refutation was to the 184 claim is that the murder of Nikki Benedict did not happen 184 days after Sherry Jo Bates. It happened 183. And I left out a very important line in our episode, The Murder of Nikki Benedict. I still hope you'll listen to it, but it's that October 30th, the day that Sherry Jo Bates was murdered, was the 303rd day of the year. And Nikki Benedict was murdered on the 121st day of the year, which is May 1st. 303rd day and the 121st day. And that means 365 plus 121 minus 303 equals 183. So that is something that Gareth Penn wanted to say, but Joe also did some mathematical backtracking and showed that you can count the day that Sherry Jo Bates was killed on October 30th, and then that makes it 184, and that would all line up. Also, what we said about Blue Rock Springs occurring on the 184th day of the year. And when we get to the segment on Joan Webster, I would want to share some more things about these mathematical signatures, and we will provide some skeptical responses. It's also just I think it's very important, though, to re-emphasize that point that Gareth Penn has such a large opportunity to deny all of this stuff, to put all of this to rest, saying, no, I'm not the Zodiac Killer, here's why. When somebody is being confronted about a murder, like you can, especially at the murder of somebody like Nikki Benedict at age 14, and this is the stuff I was talking to Joe about, why not just say that, hey, this person's a child, they were murdered, no, I didn't do it, and here's my explanation for that, instead of just like, he always provides these types of dodges, and even in that comment that we read off, he's calling somebody like a piece of shit, or he said that their comments are like something that flies would go around like a piece of shit or something like that, and that's not a denial. I mean, he could put this stuff to rest in a much easier fashion. But anyway, what do you think about anything involving Gareth Penn as a suspect? And we will continue this in our discussions on the murder of Joan Webster right after this quick message. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to remind everybody about YouTube Premium. If you use the YouTube Premium features, you can download Black Box Online Radio, take it on the go, out walking, in the car, anywhere and anyhow. YouTube Premium also gives you access to special YouTube original shows and YouTube music. And now, let's get back to the episode. Hello again. So when we're talking about the Zodiac killer mystery and the Zodiac murders, I think there's one thing that I need to be very clear about, and that was something in relation to Gareth Penn and his claim about Michael O'Hare and the bodies of water that I'm not sure I left in when we played that little audio segment in the early part. And how this connects to bodies of water is that Michael O'Hare's middle name was Henry. Michael Henry O'Hare. And even in the book Time 17, Gareth Penn was like, this isn't perfect, but Henry O'Hare, that's two H's and an O, so H2O, his name is like Michael H2O, and that the bodies of water are clues as to where these murders may have taken place, that there's a reason why that murders were committed at Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, and in the fire hydrant that you heard at Presidio Heights, and also that's near Washington Street. And Gareth Penn even thought that it was possible that Wash was something related to a body of water, and that's how all of these things are connected. And another thing that Joe shared with me from Zodiac Killer Insights is that it's possible in a way to use some of the angles to tie Lake Herman Road in to the Radian theory. You will not get the parking lot where David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were murdered, but you will get to the road that connects the road that is the famous Lake Herman Road that people are talking about. Once again, that's the actual kind of highway, more or less, or the auto route, we should say, rather than a highway, but not to the Lake Herman Road parking lot. But Lake Herman Road does not exactly have a lake nearby, if I understand. Instead, it's called Lake Herman Road, but the place where David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were murdered is actually the entrance to a water pumping station, and you can even see like the fence and the dividers on that one. Now, at this time, I would like to move over to the murder of Joan Webster from 1981. And this is, as I just have to say this again, people often don't think about Massachusetts with the Zodiac Killer Mystery. They often don't think about the year 1981 with the Zodiac Killer Mystery. But there are a couple of good sources out there about the murder of Joan Webster, and Joan Webster's sister-in-law, Eve Carson, has become a very big authority on the case. She runs a YouTube channel called Eve Knows the Truth, and I think I've seen all the videos that she has on the murder of Joan Webster, and she also did an interview on True Crime Real Stories, Mommy's Mole. The Murder of Joan Webster is the name of the title. And I would actually like to read off something that they have written because I think it's a very good introduction. And I hope that you guys would check out this source as a follow-up. This was, it's an hour and 16 minutes. It's a podcast that Eve Carson did. But let's just read their introduction that they have written for us here. Karen Wolf Shergin walked her dogs on April 18th, 1990, on her remote wooded property on Chewbacca Road. The veterinarian spotted a white sphere obstructing a drainage ditch. When she reached to dislodge it, she reeled back in horror. She immediately called the police. I saw something in the woods that looked like a punched-in volleyball, Karen told the Beverly Times on April 25th, 1990. I looked closer, and it was a human skull. It had sutured zigzag lines. Those are unique to human skulls. Officer Hatfield was the first to respond, and the initial conclusion determined that the discovery was indeed a human skull. Hamilton Police Chief Walter Cullen arrived at the scene and photographed the find. The Massachusetts State Police Crime Prevention and Control Unit, the CPAC, dispatched Corporal Dennis Marks to take charge of the crime scene. Local police sent the skull and a nearby black boot to Hunt Memorial Hospital to examine them, but nothing else surfaced in the initial cursory search of the surrounding area. Notices went out to departments to assist the resident force, and names poured in to compare the cranium to known missing persons. Joan Webster's name appeared on the list, but the resting spot was more than 30 miles from the long speculated crime scene at Pier 7 in Boston. Of course, it's being checked out, but the location doesn't seem to correlate. Circumstances pointed to her being taken out in a boat and dumped at sea. And this is the story of Joan Webster. Once again, you can hear more about this in that podcast, True Crime Real Stories, Mommy's a Mole. And that is available on this channel with what appears to be a Vietnamese name, Darak Si Tan Trong. But True Crime Real Stories, the Joan Webster murder, you can hear about it there. Now, Eve Carson also has a great series of videos out, and to give some of an introduction to the murder of Joan Webster, this is something that is quite different than a lot of the things about the Zodiac Killer mystery. I mean, this is a victim who is leaving Logan Airport in Boston, Massachusetts, and she's never seen again. I mean, okay, we have the things going on with bodies of water, but at an airport, I mean, that's one thing. And for the longest time, a lot of people thought that Joan Webster was abducted, she was murdered, and her body was dumped in the water at sea off of a pier, something to that effect. But as you just heard there, her remains were found in 1990, nearly 10 years after she had disappeared. And in this one, we talked about Gareth Penn, we've talked about Michael O'Hare, but we should also be very clear that there are other suspects. There was an individual named Leonard Paradiso. I always want to say Paradisio. I might mess up because that's kind of imprinted in my mind, but I believe his name is Leonard Paradiso. And he was someone who, I believe he even confessed to it. Like he was someone who was confessing to a crime that he did not commit because he said that she was buried at sea, and then people were just going with this, although it was never proven. But then it turned out once she was found on land that story was simply not true. Now, on the Zodiac Killer Insights series channel, there is a video that about the death of Joan Webster, and it is not with words, like there's music and there's some cards that have been written on the screen, and I would like to go through that, and we can talk about the 1981 murder of Joan Webster. The subject of Joan Webster's murder on the east coast of the United States has gathered momentum once again. Miss Eve Carson, Joan's sister-in-law, has dedicated her life to finding the person responsible for her abduction on the night of November 28, 1981. Joan's remains were eventually located in Massachusetts on April 18th, 1991. So as we really have to say that, I mean, that is just short of a decade, a couple months short of a decade. I mean, well, several actually, but close by. Joan's cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the skull. Now, here's another thing. Where in the Zodiac Killer mystery is there any death that was caused by blunt force trauma? Even if you're going to talk about Sherry Jo Bates, she was murdered by knife. Nikki Benedict was murdered by knife. They were stabbed to death. I mean, this is something that is not like the Zodiac Killer mystery at all, unless you're going to say that there was some type of, like someone's just not having any pattern. If you're going to say that there's no pattern at all in the Zodiac Killer mystery, which more or less I do support that statement, then you could say that maybe there is some type of connection there, but the Zodiac Killer has never done anything like that I can list off the top of my head. Miss Carson is personable enough and provides enough information regarding Joan's cold case, and she's qualified to do so. She was part of Joan's immediate family. However, I'm led to believe that family relationships have soured over the years. Still reading from the Zodiac Killer Insights series. Joan's parents, now deceased, were interesting people nonetheless, and both had links to the Central Intelligence Agency, and that's where they met. George Webster was an administrator at the CIA, not an agent, contrary to popular belief. And then Eleanor Webster also had some involvement with the agency, but we are not certain of that. All right. I even didn't want to say that stuff. Like that was there's a little segment about that written in the description of that other episode that I was talking about, the true crime real stories, the Joan Webster murder, and also called Mommy's a Mole. That thing is written in there talking about the CIA connection, because I think that that would be more of a distraction, if anything, or unless we would have some more source material, because I know that some people would just hear that and they would be like, "Oh, their daughter was murdered," to send a message in terms of they must have been doing some CIA work and this was trying to get them to stop. But there are just other things that we can examine with the case of Joan Webster before we look at any of those giant unwinding sets of facts. I mean, we can accept that they did work for the CIA, though. On Sunday, May 10th, 2020, Miss Carson posted the following information. There was a card that caught some attention. The Websters received a Santa Claus card with an article offering a reward out on the outside of the envelope. The card was part of the Zodiac theory in Joan's case. The postmark date or location of where the card was mailed was unknown. However, Gareth Penn was making efforts to reach out to the Websters with his Zodiac theory. Gareth Penn learned about Joan's case in December of 1981 from news reports, according to Penn himself. Gareth Penn had previously contacted the FBI with his Michael Henry O'Hare theory about the MIT professor. Penn had associates in the East trying to promote Penn's Zodiac theory. Now, when I was listening to Eve Carson in her own words, she did not seem to entertain too much about the Zodiac Killer mystery. She did not seem to even want to explore this possibility. Rather, Eve Carson seems to look more at other possible suspects in the murder of Joan Webster, and she wants to definitely to have the case solved, but she does not believe that the Zodiac Killer angle is super beneficial. When it comes to the murder of Nikki Benedict, the family seemed like they were actually a little bit more open to the possibility, because their daughter was murdered, their family member was murdered, and then when they learned about how there could be a Zodiac Killer connection to the murder of Nikki Benedict, they were like, all right, at least this is something. At least this is pushing us down a particular pathway. Now, let's look at another slide that has been written here by Joe from Zodiac Killer Insights. Okay, a few things of importance and worth noting. Firstly, Miss Carson, that's talking about Eve Carson, is claiming that Gareth Penn is nothing more than a Zodiac Killer copycat. Secondly, that Santa Claus card that we were talking about could have been mailed by Gareth Penn or one of his associates. And thirdly, she's not privy to all the information regarding Gareth Penn. In the first instance, I may be missing the punchline, for that I apologize. However, what on earth could a copycat Penn gain from sending a card to a victim's father, a taunting postcard 60 days after his daughter's disappearance? And when we said 2020, that's the date that the stuff went public. I mean, as I understood from reading it off, that is what he's saying, that's the date she published it on the internet. I mean, obviously this took place years ago. This took place, as you heard, 60 days after his daughter's disappearance, that a card that was signed with the letters SC on it and is referred to as the Santa Claus card, and I believe that it was mailed from Austin, Texas. And I think Joe is going to tell us more about that in the video. Besides his insertion in her murder and rubbing both George Webster and the authorities' noses in their boo-boos, I don't think anything. Now, is this really what Gareth Penn is doing? Is Gareth Penn just a serial killer that has flown under the radar by hiding in plain sight? I'm not necessarily sure, but I want to be clear that Joe accuses Gareth Penn of committing a set of murders that includes 8 people, the 5 Zodiac Killer victims, possibly Joan Webster, but Nikki Benedict and Sherry Jo Bates. Now, let's look at another possible Gareth Penn connection to the murder of Joan Webster. Joan Webster disappeared on November 28, 1981. Gareth Penn first contacted George Webster on March 3, 1982. March 3rd was the 62nd day of the year, and there are 95 days that separated Joan's disappearance to Gareth Penn's initial contact with George Webster. 9 plus 5 is 14, 6 plus 2 is 8. That gives us 1, 4, and 8. That's the digits of 184. Well, these numbers have come back again, although it is 14 and 8, but you obviously would just put the 8 in the middle there. You have the same digits. So that is the 184, the alphanumeric representation of Gareth Penn's name. So this is connected to Sherry Jo Bates, Nikki Benedict, and now we see Joan Webster as well. Do you think that that's a bit of a stretch, using the numbers 14 and 8 and just putting the 8 in the middle? I'm asking that as a challenge question. Do you think that that is a bit of a stretch? And I would love to hear anybody's thoughts on that in the comments section. But in regards to this, after the abduction, when I was speaking to Joe about the murder of Joan Webster, he brought up a very good point that if Joan Webster left in somebody's car after leaving Logan Airport, are we even certain how many people would have been in that car? And I think that's an excellent observation because, well, that means that there could have been a group that murdered Joan Webster, or even if there are other people in the car, 2 people, 3 people, did he or she not take them somewhere else? Did not take her somewhere else, and then one person brought her to a different location and committed the murder? Meaning, was this a group thing, or did she leave with somebody later on? Did she interact with anybody later on in the day, or did she simply get an honest ride from somebody, and then later on somebody else did something to her? How many people are involved? And until we get answers to that particular question, I think that her murder will go unsolved. Now, we're going to introduce another individual to the Joan Webster theory, and his name is Ralph Reed III, R-E-A-D, Ralph Reed. And Gareth Penn had a friend living in Austin, Texas. And actually, it says here that Ralph Reed was the best man at one of his weddings. And Gareth Penn indicated that he had not seen Ralph since 1980. Later in a piece, he states that he and his wife Diane flew into Austin in 1985. Granted, that does say flying into Austin, but it does not mention Ralph Reed in the article. I mean, Gareth Penn has done that before, like I said, about saying that he was in Oklahoma on the night of the Paul Stine murder, but then later on says that he was actually in the Bay Area for all of the confirmed Zodiac killer incidents. So that's something else that I think is in the tradition of Gareth Penn. So, if he is that close of being the best man at his weddings, you would think, unless they had a major falling out, that he would have kept some type of contact. Let's read what Joe has written. I assume Gareth Penn hadn't seen Ralph for 5 years because he says so. However, I can't prove that he's telling the truth, nor can anybody for that matter. I can attest to you that he didn't see Ralph Reed before or immediately after the disappearance of Joan Webster. Ralph passed away, and the only person available for sources on this information is Gareth Penn. In other words, Penn can choose to deny the claim. He's lied in the past, so nothing stops him from lying again. And we've already also talked about a few things. I mean, we just said 2 right there. Inconsistent aspects of the Gareth Penn narrative that Gareth Penn has put forward himself. Was Gareth Penn in Austin encompassing the mailing of the Santa Claus card? That was the card that's mailed 60 days after the disappearance of Joan Webster. Once again, her body was not found until 1990. So, was Gareth Penn the person who mailed this, or did he have somebody in Austin, Texas mail this from him? That card that is kind of mocking the disappearance of Joan Webster, signed with an SC, referred to as the Santa Claus card, was mailed from Austin, Texas. Did Penn or one of his acquaintances mail the anonymous typewritten letter from Cambridge, Massachusetts to D.A. John Droney? The letter writer alleges that Joan's body was placed in Walden Pond and that she would be found in a bag. The location was erroneous, but the bag claim was true. Well, the skull was definitely not found in a bag. You just heard that introduction that we read off. That's how somebody found out about Joan Webster's remains to begin with. They found that her skull was seen with the naked eye as she was walking by, walking her dog. So not the entirety. And no, she wasn't found in Walden Pond, submerged, of course. And some people just thought that she was buried at sea because of that Leonard Paradiso confession. Did Gareth Penn have a hand in Joan's disappearance and eventual death? Miss Carson doesn't think so, but Joe from Zodiac Killer Insights tends to think differently. And it's a big stretch because there's another piece of information that we'll say in a second that I would want to bring up as a type of challenge and I would love to hear your responses about that as well, because I think that soon Joe is going to introduce a different suspect in regards to this mystery, and it really relates into an eyewitness sighting of a man who was seen. Okay, so they've placed this man at, that has been seen with Joan Webster at the airport. The way that Joe describes it is that there was a brief law enforcement description regarding the man that was alleged to have left Logan Airport with Joan Webster on the night of her disappearance. And we know that someone has had a look at him because they have created a composite sketch. And he was described as being this is an estimate, 42 years old. It says the person was 42 years old, full beard, and his hair was less kinky than overlay. It's kind of hard to expect that someone would describe kinky as a hair type. I'm not really familiar with too many descriptions like that, but there was a composite sketch that was created of this bearded man, and that was seen with Joan Webster, and that was drawn on December 21st, 1981. Now, the authorities suppressed the sketch, and I'm reading off Joe's card. The authorities suppressed the sketch. I believe that, this is Joe talking, I believe the authorities suppressed the sketch because of a likeness to a trooper named Andrew Palumbo. By the way, if I said before that his name was Mike Palumbo, for some reason that name stood out to me, that this is Andrew Palumbo, who was assigned to the F barracks at Logan Airport. Miss Carson recovered the sketch sometime in 2009. And I do have to confess, though, that if anything that Joe has shared, there is an enormous similarity between Gareth Penn and the person who is in the composite sketch. However, I mean, if you do look at this thing, you might instantly note that Gareth Penn has very straight hair, and the person in the composite sketch has lots of dark curls in their hair. But this is another Zodiac tactic of researchers saying that to implicate someone, they must have been wearing a wig. Now, Andrew Palumbo is the guy that goes on to become a suspect in Joan Webster's disappearance. And from talking to Joe, I learned that Eve Carson thinks that Andrew Palumbo is a very high suspect on her list for having some involvement with Joan's disappearance and murder. And I mean, for years, people seem to have been going down those dead ends, or they were going down those just incorrect pathways of people thinking that she was murdered and buried at sea, or her body had been dumped in the Boston Harbor, when in reality that was quite far from the truth. Now, Gareth Penn does have a lot of similarities to this person. Gareth Penn is also very frequently known to have been sporting a beard. He would have had to have been wearing some type of wig, but a lot of people really want to say that they have found the Zodiac killer, but to make their suspect fit all these descriptions, they have to say that he was wearing a wig. Robert Graysmith said this about Arthur Lee Allen, and Donald Lee Booyock, another one. Kevin Robert Brooks said that Donald Lee Booyock must have been wearing wigs at the time when he was committing the Zodiac killer murders. This is something that is used frequently by researchers. Even Robert Linkletter, and the stuff that Mae Brussel read off about him, is that just making the claim that Robert Linkletter frequently liked to change his appearance, that he would wear wigs and all sorts of beard lengths and hair lengths and changing his appearance all the time. I mean, now I would ask you, what do you think about that? Because this is the second challenge question. Do you believe if somebody is saying that their suspect had to have been wearing a wig, does that mean that they do not meet the physical descriptions and that they are making an assumption? I mean, it's not necessarily to say that it's impossible. And like, for example, I thought that people were really making a lot of assumptions when they were using this type of thinking. But in reality, I thought it was an assumption as well to say that, hey, if you're going to say that people have been cutting off the soles of different boots and different shoes and gluing them onto theirs, and that's why they're leaving these funky different footprints that are all over the map, I was like, you guys are just talking out of your asses, more or less. But then I came across an article recently that talked about how Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, did what? Well, he cut off shoes, like the soles of different shoes, different boots, and glued them onto his shoes, and so he would leave different types of footprints. That type of methodical criminal behavior definitely exists, and it's like maybe I was the one who was being too dismissive. So I would love to hear what people have to say in the comments section. And let's go on to another card that has been written by Joe here. Gareth Penn was 40 years old and 332 days at the time of Joan's presumed murder, and they estimated that that man in the sketch was 42. I mean, of course, they don't know who that is, but they saying that 42 years old, that is purely an estimation. So Gareth Penn would have been just short of 41. On the night of October 30th, 1966, Sherry Jo Bates was shepherded by an unknown male in Riverside, California, which led to her death. As coincidence would believe, Joan Webster was shepherded to another vehicle by an unidentified male and led to her death. Is that really the connection, though? I mean, most people believe that Sherry Jo Bates came out of the Riverside City College library. Her car wouldn't start, somebody had tampered with it, and some guy offered to help, and in the Bates confession letter it says Miss Bates went to the slaughter like a lamb. That is most likely hype, though. But you can hear some more about that on other Black Box Online radio episodes to hear about Sherry Jo Bates. Now, both male parents, Joseph Bates and George Webster, received communications after the killing. That's the Santa Claus card signed as C, and Bates had to die, there will be more, signed with a Z. That is actually a good parallel. And Joe describes it as coincidence number 2. I think that that's a very good thing, though. I mean, like, now that is something that is a lot more valuable than just, okay, some guy lured a woman to his car. How many times has that happened? But sending in these confusing letters, that is something that is a little bit more in the tradition of anything that would tie in a single perpetrator to the murder of Joan Webster and the murders that took place in California from 66 to 69. But I don't think that that is 100% proof. All right, and if you're still listening to this, we have the absolute biggest, most valuable material to reveal. Number 1 is that there's that Santa Claus card, right, that's signed with an SC that was mailed to the Websters, and I believe it's directly addressed to George Webster. So what it said was, deliver to Joan Webster family, Glen Ridge, NJ. I'm going to say that one more time. Deliver to Joan Webster family, Glen Ridge, NJ. Family is spelled incorrectly in the traditional Zodiac killer mystery, right? Misspellings, but that's not the big thing. Family is spelled Famile. Now, why would somebody do that? And this is Joe's observation, not mine, but that brings the letter count in that sentence to 38. What did we say at the beginning? What are these two numbers that are operating in Gareth Penn's theory? 38 and 17. Remember that thing he read off about, or he had written about Michael O'Hare and the 38th birthday of his mother? I mean, 38 and 17 are very valuable numbers to the Zodiac killer mystery and Gareth Penn's setup. And I believe from reading Time 17, although it's been a very long time since I've read that book, that 38 was the old zoning code for Cambridge, and I mean, and it's still at the end of the postcode 02138, 02139. I have some family in Massachusetts that have zip codes like that, but in terms of the Santa Claus card, this is what I really want to hear people's responses to. I'm just going to read Joe's last card, and this will be the final one. Now, the Zodiac was the Zodiac in the state of Massachusetts. In other words, the Zodiac is staking the claim with the signature on the card SC, that's referred to as the Santa Claus card. The number 193 is going to become valuable. S is the 19th letter of the alphabet, and C is the 3rd. So why is there this Santa Claus card? Is that to leave this mathematical signature? S is the 19th letter of the alphabet and C is the 3rd. The number 193 equals AIC. A is the first letter, right? And then I is the 9th letter. C is the 3rd letter of the alphabet. 193. That is giving us the letters A, I, and C. What do we say about Joan Webster's family? Where do they work? The CIA. So then we have already gotten that connection there. But there's more. There's more. Because the letters I, A, and C are found in what word? Zodiac. Right? Right? George Webster received the Santa Claus card on the 27th of January 1982. Gareth Penn's birthday is on the 1st of January 19, oh, well, Gareth Penn's birthday was on the 1st of January 1982. No, Gareth Penn was born in the 1940s. I mean, like, but yes, of course, his birthday is every year. This would have been a short time after Gareth Penn's birthday. That maybe was not the most dramatic intonation, but that's the way it's written here. Okay, between Gareth Penn's birthday, January 1st, and January 27th, how many days are there? 26. What's the 26th letter of the alphabet? Z. So now we have Z, I, A, and C. There were 4 stamps on this Halloween card, and the Zodiac did use excessive postage. That's another thing that's meant to be shared. So what's the 4th letter of the alphabet? D. So we have Z, D, I, A, and C. On the back of the card it reads, Mr. Santa Claus, USA, Grandview Avenue, Ridgewood, NY. Please, where can I write you? The word count in that sentence that I just read off in my mumbling voice is 15. What's the 15th letter of the alphabet? O. Z, O, D, I, A, and C. All the letters are there to spell out Zodiac. That's the thing that I wanted to hear your guys' response to. With this type of thinking, I am horribly skeptical. I mean, if I have proof that this was all designed by Gareth Penn and all of these words and numbers here are meant to match up, then I would say that, yeah, okay, he was the murderer of Joan Webster. He was the Zodiac killer. But with this type of thinking as well, I think we need more than that. I think that there's also a possibility that someone could be trying to force a pattern onto a situation, and perhaps you could find other ways to count up the numbers and add things together. And here's another one that I learned about from you guys in the comments section. I think it might have been Michael McJenkins who had written this out, but the Zodiac famously talked about murdering 37 people, right? What is the 37th day of the year? February 6th. Like 2-6, February is the second month, right? 2-6, and that the 37th day of the year is 2-6, like 26, and Z is the 26th letter of the alphabet. Even if that's not actually connected to the Zodiac killer mystery, that shows that there is some type of like underlying intersectionality in our human thought process and human psychology. And I love learning about that stuff. But this number 193 here, I mean, firstly, that's deviating from 184, but it's not meant to. It's meant to show that CIA, maybe Joan Webster's family, and then that this also gives us I, A, and C to end Zodiac. I think that we need more than that. I'm not convinced at all that there's any actual connection in the 4 postage stamps. How do we know that we're supposed to look for 4 postage stamps? It's possible. And it's also possible, as we said, psychological intersectionality, that someone was doing this, giving away secrets and not even being aware of it, but I am not convinced. Now, at this time, I would like to thank everyone who has listened to this episode on Michael O'Hare, Gareth Penn, and the murder of Joan Webster. Please visit the Zodiac Killer Insight series here on YouTube. I recommend those videos a lot to get some of this similar types of thinking. Also, ZodiacCyphers.com. And one more time, Eve Knows the Truth, to hear Eve Carson's videos about the murder of her sister-in-law, Joan Webster. And one more time, True Crime, Real Stories, Mommy's a Mole, the Joan Webster murder. That is sharing some more info about all of that. Thank you so much to everybody who's listened, and please, I would love to hear your responses to the challenge questions. As you see, I'm somewhat skeptical of the Gareth Penn narrative, and I'm extraordinarily skeptical of the Michael O'Hare narrative, but I would still love to hear what you guys have to say all the same. Share some ideas in the comments section below. That's all for me now, and until next time.